Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel organized today titled In the Aftermath of the Earthquake in Syria, a discussion with Muzna Duried and Omar Alshogre. I'd like to introduce myself briefly. I'm Marwa Daoudy. I'm an associate professor at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. And it is my privilege today to gather these two very distinguished speakers around a topic that is close to our hearts, the devastating effects of the earthquake on Syria and Turkey. We have so far a human toll of 43,000 casualties and whole cities wiped out. And we have felt the need to have a panel specifically dedicated to Syria, as Syria, unfortunately, escapes the normal channels of international aid and has been quite neglected in the last 2 weeks. And our speakers here will be able to inform us about what the situation is and what could be done. Before I start introducing the speakers, I encourage our community at Georgetown, our students here who came today, and also our online audience to help in whatever way you can. We have posters around, and we put the poster on the chat also with ways to contribute to organizations. There are QR codes where you can help the civilians who are still under the rubbles, those who have been saved, who have no houses, no tents, no shelters. And there are many ways for the community here in the US to provide and to lend a hand to the bereaved there in Syria, specifically Northwest and Northern Syria. Let me start by introducing Muzna Duried. I'm very pleased to welcome Muzna here on campus. Muzna works as a Senior Program Development Officer at the White Helmets. The White Helmets is a civil defense protection force, which won the Alternative Nobel Prize in 2016 and has so far saved about 3,000 lives on the ground. It has 3,000 volunteers in 40 locations in the Northwest, and it has been a crucial organization in providing relief, and Muzna will tell us about it. But I would like first to introduce Muzna. Muzna is a former refugee, an advocate for diaspora women's refugee political participation, and a co-founder of the Syrian Women's Political Movement to engage Syrian women in politics and peace talks and shape the future of Syria. In Canada, she's a co-founder of Refugee Advisor Network Canada, where she works to advance the meaningful participation of refugees in shaping international policies. She also works on multiple initiatives and networks focusing on child and forced marriage issues among Syrian refugees. This includes founding Women Refugees Not Captives, an organization, I suppose, or initiative, aiming to end forced and child marriages among Syrian refugee and women and girls. She is a co-recipient of Canada's first ever research award on women, peace and security, and the recipient of the Canadian Excellence in Global Women's and Children's Health Award and the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers Annual Award for Outstanding Advocacy on behalf of the human rights of refugees. Welcome, Muzna. So pleased to have you. Our second distinguished speaker is Omar Alshogre, who's well known to our Georgetown campus community and students. Omar is a Syrian public speaker and a human rights advocate. Omar was arrested and imprisoned for 3 years for participating in rallies and demonstrations against the Syrian regime. He currently engages in raising awareness of the situation in Syria, leading the Syrian Emergency Task Force efforts to advocate for the liberation of detainees as the Director of Detainees Affairs. He's also the spokesperson for Atrocities Tracker, an independent human rights project that monitors and documents human rights violations. He's a key witness to multiple national prosecution efforts to hold the Assad regime accountable for war crimes. So the format for today, Muzna and Omar will start by having introductory remarks, telling us about the situation, and then we'll open it to questions. I will ask maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll open to our in-person and online audience for your questions. For the online audience, please write your questions in the chat box, and I will make sure to relay your interest and your questions. Muzna, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for arranging this panel during this difficult time. As I'm part of the White Helmets team from Montreal office, since last Sunday, the 6th of February, we've been working on the search and rescue operations to help civilians in Northwest Syria. So just like before starting providing like the explanation and the description about our work in after the aftermath of earthquake, I want to just like to explain what does it mean Northwest Syria, because it's very confusing for people to understand. Okay, this is Syria, but Syria has a different three parts. The Northwest Syria, it's a home for 4.6 million people who have been displaced for multiple times because of the bombardments led by the Syrian regime and Russian air forces. Also, they fled detention. They fled also siege, like from eastern Ghouta and south of Damascus. They also they fled like all kinds of atrocities led by the Syrian regime and Russia, and backed also by Iran. So why the Northwest Syria? Why they've been like concentrated in this area? Because this is the only now area which is out of the control of Assad regime, and this is why they are all of them there, and half of them they are like IDPs inside the camps. The other half it's like in cities and villages. This area depends on the international aid and international assistance. And there is also, before even the earthquake, we had the a real blackmail from Russia to support like Assad by using the veto inside the Security Council to block the aid delivery to this area, even though it's the Security Council doesn't need like, and the UN like system doesn't need like the approval or like the permission from Syria to enter and to deliver aid. But it just like we since the beginning of the revolution in Syria back in 2011, we witnessed how the international community not only been reluctant in supporting Syrians and Syrian people, but also supporting regimes in a way. They are delivering aid and working by business as usual without even questioning if they are supporting, if their work is really supporting the people on the ground or if they are supporting the perpetrators. So when the White Helmets team is well known in Syria because we gained the trust, because we are the only trained team on the ground. We provide search and rescue operations for the victims of bombardments. And this is how our team gained this experience, which is we say it's very exceptional because like there's like a very rare cases where there's like a ongoing bombardments for a decade of atrocity, including also responding to chemical attacks, to demining the soil from unexploded ordinances, providing healthcare for women and children, and the community resilience program for civilians, specifically in IDP camps. Also, we had a COVID, we have cholera right now in Syria, and all of these accumulated crises. And then we had last week the earthquake. When we got like when we had like the earthquake last week, we spreaded the word about like our numbers, the centers of the locations of our centers, and also how civilians could reach out to us. Through WhatsApp, through Signal, Telegram, Facebook, all of the social media, and also through like our members on the ground. We mobilize like all of our team, the 3,000 people, even also administrative team members to reach the scene and to support civilians. We reach around like 60 villages and cities in Northwest to provide search and rescue operations. Until now, as I'm now talking, it's still like the operations undertaken in Syria, but it's for different phases. I'm gonna explain also what phases we have in the White Helmets to respond to the current situation. We rescued like the exact number, it's 2,950, and we recovered also the bodies of 2,168. You might also find like different numbers, but like our numbers, it's only for those we rescued and those we recovered them from under the rubble. So in the first like 3 days after the earthquake, we name it and we call it as like the golden days, because like you have a window time where you have like the highest chance to find survivors alive. And during this like crucial 3 days, we haven't received any aid. Like even they didn't send like a trained rescue dogs to support it, just like to detect where it's like civilians and then rubble. And this is not only for the first 3 days. It lasted also for the first week. So we received the first like 6 trucks of international aid after the first week. And even these trucks, they have been scheduled before the earthquake. So because the Bab al-Hawa entry point has been destroyed or like damaged by the earthquake, so they postponed the delivery after a week after the earthquake. So it wasn't for the earthquake. The aid wasn't also technical to support civilians and also to support our team. We sent Mayday calls for the international community that we need heavy vehicles, heavy equipment, and search and rescue equipment, because like we suffered also after COVID from the funding cuts. And not only the white helmets, also the Syrian civil society and local organizations, including SAMS and medical facilities and health facilities in Syria. Also, I want to mention that like 53% of health facilities in Northwest Syria are out of the surface because of the bombardments. And then we had also the funding cuts after COVID, and when the earthquake hit, when our team tried to transfer like patients and survivors to hospitals, unfortunately, we had also damaged hospitals and health facilities, and those that remain were like fully overcrowded, and there is no space also for survivors to have like the services and first aid response. When after like 1 hour of the earthquake, we did like an evaluation to the situation, and we divided our response into 3 phases. The first phase, which is search and rescue, obviously, which is to save as much as we can lives. So this is why our team was working like around the clock, literally without having a break, and we mobilized all of our team. And during this phase also, we send like appeals for local communities, like for local civilians in Northwest Syria, whereas which is very impressive. Whereas like our capacity at the time was a 40%, but with the aid that we received from local people, such as like a fuel, so people take off like a fuel that they have for heating in their homes to support our vehicles. They took over also equipment, warehouses, vehicles, everything, and supported us. So we ramped up like our response from 40% to 60% because of the reaction of local people and those who are also displaced and those who are civilians under like literally international siege. So because of this support from local people, even like Syrian local organizations like Mulham Team, SAMS, Basma and Zaytoune, they donated for us like with their fuels for their hospitals, their also schools and so on. So, and also for their offices. So we got this fuel to ramp up also our search and rescue operations. The second phase, which is the current phase, which is search and retrieval. So we are now trying to also to recover as much as we can bodies, because like also we need to provide the closure for families because the majority of them, they don't know where like their family members. Literally, my Syrian Facebook, it's turned to be like as a lost and found, but for humans. You can see it's like hundreds of people just like lost, and specifically children without parents and without family. We also try to connect between like survivors, the bodies that we are finding, and how we can also document names and locations of these bodies, and also to provide disclosure also for families. Not only for that, but also because we have a great concerns of the spread of diseases right now, because there's bodies all over the northwest Syria, and we already face like struggles with the health situation and the diseases with like cholera, COVID, and before we had polio as well. The third phase, which is like will be like it's more for long term, which is like starting from the end of February until most likely May, which is to provide like a recovery for the area. I just like to fix like the network, electricity, water, and also to fix also roads, and to open roads, and also to provide analysis for partially damaged buildings, because like we had a 551 completely damaged buildings, and we have until now 1,578 partially damaged buildings, which is most likely they need to be destroyed as well, because there's high risk on civilians to come back to these buildings. Specifically, that we have aftershocks, and also yesterday we had another like earthquake yesterday, with also bombardments in northwest, in countryside of Aleppo in northwest. So Assad is still bombing civilians with this situation. Even there is no buildings remain to be bombed, and like also people still like in the streets. My family in Jundaris, which is the most impacted area, just like to give you the example about the scale of the situation. Out of the residents of this city, Jundaris, we have like a 9 out of 10 they are displaced. Also, like there's like now all over the Syria, we have 5 million displaced people, homeless, literally homeless in the street, because like there is nowhere to go, and there is no clarity in the situation of the humanitarian aid. On Monday, Bashar al-Assad gave it his approval to deliver aid for northwest Syria through Bab al-Salame and Bab al-Ra'i crossing entries, even though like this area, it's out of his control, but he is blackmailing the international community, and also manipulating humanitarian aid, and which is also this earthquake reveals a lot of how the international community deal with the victims. You may see it's like how rescue teams like arrived to Turkey right after the earthquake within like hours, but in Syria we had nothing because the victim's identity, it's different, and then you can have aid based on your identity, not based on your needs. And even when they say it's like we sent aid for Syria, so this is not for northwest Syria, it's for a regime-held area where it's like more than 117 airplanes landed in Damascus to deliver aid for Bashar al-Assad. Also, they talked about like sanctions as like obstacle to deliver aid, which is not true, because like we all work on a humanitarian sector, and sanctions, it's not about blocking aid for humanitarian sector, but it's like to put pressure on the regime members, and also to put pressure on to have like political solution for Syria. Also, I'd just like to give you an example about the scale of expenses that we have at the White Helmets. It's just like why we send like calls for civilians and for international community to provide us with the fuel, because like we face also a shortage in fuel to send like our vehicles. Before the earthquake, we consumed like 4,000 liter per day. But after the earthquake, now we are consuming over like a 70,000 liter per day. So you can imagine the scale of expenses and the needs for the White Helmets, because like search and rescue operations are very high and costly as well for the organization. And we don't have the reserves to respond with our capacity. It's really the situation, it's beyond our capacity. While the borders have been like closed over the first week after the earthquake, but unfortunately, the border were opened just like to repatriate the bodies of Syrian refugees who have been killed by the earthquake in northern Turkey. So around like 1,700 bodies of Syrian refugees who passed away in southern of Turkey have been repatriated to Syria through the northwest borders. And this is also another example how it's like the international community, the hypocrisy of the international community actually, because like when they want to open the borders to repatriate the bodies of refugees, they can, but they can't send even food or support for the victims of the earthquake. The situation is really alarming, and we have great concerns now for civilians and for survivors specifically, because the trauma and the current humanitarian situation, it's really alarming, and there is no enough food and support. The approval from Bashar al-Assad was only for 3 months to deliver aid, which is nothing, given like it just like also to give you an example about logistics. When we do like a procurement to get like equipments or medicines or whatever. So now there's also a shortage in suppliers. So if you wanted to procure like, for example, equipments or medicine, and there's like shortage inside Turkey, they give the priority for Turkey before Syria. And this is the only market we have access for. And also given the situation of like shipment and the situation also of the roads and so on. So 3 months will do nothing for us. The third phase, which is the recovery, also we can't also plan for this phase, because we don't have a pledge from the countries and from member states regarding how we're going to restore the life of survivors for the long term, and how we can help them to restore their dignity, their life, and their normal life. There's a lot of videos, but one of the stuck in my mind until now, and it's really when one of our team was like standing on the ripple, and he just like heard cries and the screams from under the rubble of women. She asked him, it just like, please take me out and please help me. And he said, sorry, we don't have enough trucks and equipments and bulldozers. And so she sent her will to him, it just like to pass it, to pass on this her will to her family. It's so hard and traumatizing for us to we provide as much as we can as a support for civilians, and we apologize from them, because like our capacity wasn't enough to save all lives, but like we received nothing from the international community. And yeah, hopefully with your support, you can put pressure on your government on mobilizing the academic also institutions to reveal the reality and the truth of what's happening in Syria, because it's not only for Syria. What is happening in Syria, it's not only about us, but also about the international system. When we allow for innocent people to be killed because of our slow response, and because we allow for a perpetrator as like Bashar al-Assad and Russia to decide who's eligible to receive aid and who's not. So this is will also be applied on all of the other countries and all of the specifically the global south. So please, like, do whatever you can, write to your MP, to your university, do research about what's happening in Syria, because we don't have the time. It's like we are really busy with the situation on the ground. But please, like, spread the word, learn about Syria, because we need every single penny and every single help from you.
Thank you very much, Muzna. Thank you very much, Muzna. And this is the question that we've been wondering about since so many years of the conflict and the murders is, do Syrian lives matter? And they obviously, when it's man-made or it's natural disaster, it seems they do not matter.
Yeah.
But our conversation today will hopefully make Syrian lives matter. And I will give now the floor to Omar to give us his inputs on what is happening. The floor is yours, Omar.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Muzna. And thank you, Professor Marwa, for arranging this. I cannot be but proud to see the white helmets on the ground in Syria, saving the lives of the innocent people. It's heartwarming, actually, to watch it. It's very sad. It's heartbreaking at the same time. But I feel proud when I see there are people on the ground that, despite the risks of the regime that could come and bomb them while rescuing other people, they would risk their lives and they would go there and would try to pull these bodies out of the rubbles. One of the videos that of course breaks everyone's heart is seeing them, pulling a little baby that was just born from under the rubbles, and more. There are so many sad stories you could see, but let's also give consideration to the hopeful stories that can actually empower us and encourage us to contribute. 12 years of war has been, they are not over. 12 years, and now we're still in the counting. Soon it's 13 years of war in Syria. The regime has been killing, torturing, displacing, raping countless people. Still in these prisons, we have over 150,000 people who are being tortured on a daily basis. Some of them are students, and guess what? Some of them are Georgetown students. We have Austin Tice, an American citizen, in Syrian prisons. He is a Georgetown student in this prison. So this could be you. It doesn't even need to be Syrian to be killed in Syria because of this brutal regime. And now, on top of all these crimes, we have an earthquake. An earthquake that's even worse than it could be in regular situation because of this destruction of the country. Today, I don't see it as a war in Syria anymore. It's just the regime killing people. The opposition does not have the force or the structure in order to fight back in a way. It's just the regime coming. You cannot have a gun and shoot an airplane down, right? I know this is about the urgency of the response to the earthquake, but we cannot disconnect the earthquake in Syria from the 12 years of war and the regime that's still killing people on the ground. Because every single problem we're facing with the aid today is because of the Syrian regime. We are not facing problems with the sanctions that are limiting any sort of aid. The biggest sanction we have on Syria is having the Assad regime in power. If the regime is out of power, we deliver any aid we want. We wouldn't have any problems. We wouldn't have the problems we were facing at the UN Security Council. So since the first few days of the earthquake, what the regime has been playing is a political game, trying to take an advantage of a disaster to gain political and financial gains by trying to lift the sanctions. So as soon as the earthquake happened, people trying to deliver aid to Syria, the regime got out with the hashtag remove sanctions, lift the sanctions on Syria. And the narrative has been built that the sanctions are on Syria. And that's a wrong phrase to have out. It should be like sanctions on the regime or on the supporters of the Syrian regime. And to a very wide extent, a lot of people believed that sanctions are limiting the delivery of aid to Syria, which is not correct for many reasons. One of them, again, we mentioned the biggest problem that's facing aid today in Syria is the Syrian regime. The second thing one can say is that the sanctions themselves have an exception for any sort of humanitarian relief. Any humanitarian aid can be taken to Syria. The problem is, the third problem is the fact that the Syrian regime is blocking any sort of aid coming to the people in most need through the UN Security Council, because on the Security Council, we have Russia and we have China. And that's the biggest problem that the democratic world is facing today, having these countries in an institution like the United Nations. The United Nations today is the absolutely most divided thing I know about. There's nothing united about it, especially when it comes to Syria. The United Nations is the most disappointing thing that I think about when I wake up. It's the saddest thing to see so many countries have managed to sit together and be useless. You know, it's like if now, after all this meeting, nothing happens. You gain no knowledge, no information, and you do not contribute. So do not be like the United Nations, right? Try to take certain tiny steps. And the most interesting things about crisis is every individual can contribute. Whether you are a professor, working on the white helmets, a public speaker, or working with the task force, or you're a student, or you're an intern at the Senate, or so on, whatever that could be if you're studying at SFS. You know, there's so much you can do. Let me give you an example. When the earthquake happened, one of the people, which is an American citizen, with no connection to Syria at all, decided, okay, now people are being displaced from already displaced filled areas, right? So he realized there will be problems with the housing. So a lot of people won't be able to find any housing in Syria, but also in Turkey. So he created the website. This guy is 21 years old, American, like I guess most of the people on this table. And his talent interest is developing apps and so on. So he developed an app for the people who have a spare room, an extra bed or whatever in their house. They can announce about that, and someone who is in need of that room for a day or two or a month or something, they can just check in, talk to them and actually match. It's like you having a dating app, you matching and you go, and you're having that place saving you for at least a few days in order for you to take the next step. And that's just like a regular person. So I believe you're extremely intelligent, or at least intelligent enough to do something. So what I can do is I try to use whatever social media platforms that I have, or my ability to deliver a speech, or the network I've been building for so many years, or my work through the Syrian Emergency Task Force, or Atrocities Tracker, or my support to the White Helmets and promoting all these organizations that I believe doing a great job. And then someone else like you who loves writing, maybe interested in pitching an article to the Hoya, Georgetown newspaper, right? Or Washington Post, or New York Times, or Al Jazeera, or whatever, because you cannot underestimate the fact that Georgetown is a huge university with a lot of students in it. Many of their parents are rich too, right? And you hear about the problems that are facing the White Helmets. Can you believe that your family is under the rubbles and you're standing over them, they asking for help, and you say, we waiting our turn for the bulldozer to come to rescue you. When you're under the rubbles, when you're dying there, you don't care about turn, you just want to be saved. And that does not only apply to the earthquake disaster, it applies to everything that's going on in Syria. I spent 3 years in torture chambers in Syria, tortured on a daily basis. You just want to get out. You want to be alive. You want humanity to do anything. And because we human have hope, the only thing that keeps you alive for a very long time is hope. I always hoped during my time in prison that the entire world was working to free me. In reality, only my mom was. Only my mom, but my mom was stronger than the entire world, and she managed to smuggle me out of prison. And today we have that huge disaster on top of so many disasters in Syria, and people, they deserve the support. And try to not only think about Syria as people in war zones, because that will disconnect you from these human on the ground. Try to think about them as siblings, as college students, and as people like you. Exactly, that's very important. Otherwise, you won't feel any bond with these people. You won't care enough, regardless, because this is not a one-day problem. We cannot help once. It's not going to be over tomorrow, and it's not going to be over in 2 months, especially now, earthquake after the war. This is the consequences of this earthquake will stay with us for years. So you cannot contribute once. You need to contribute on the long run. You need to do more. More doesn't mean that you have to spend 70 hours a week like a BCG consultant. That's not what's required from you. What you have to do is spend a minute a day, or do something 5 minutes every single week for a very long time. And what you do something you're passionate about. Don't donate money if you don't have money, because that will make your life hell, and you won't be optimistic about anything tomorrow. So you won't help anyone tomorrow, and that's a big problem. Try to use what you are able to use, what you can enjoy using. So I love public speaking. I would join Marwa for 15 sessions a day. I won't have a problem with that. I'm helping at the same time. I enjoy it. That's the only sustainable way I can do this for 50 years without being tired of that. Same thing for you. You love research. There's a lot needed on research. You love writing. So much could be published about. You love whatever, editing or social media, or it could be you may love running and going to the gym. You can make a campaign there. A lot of people, they bike across places and they get donations and they send it to people they care about. So I want you to today, after this session, just to think about something tiny, something easy to do that you can do for 2 months, 3 months, or half a year. That does not take a lot of time, doesn't take a lot of your resources, and you can use that, do that in order to help the people on the ground, because those people are really suffering. Like they are really, really suffering to a level that we may not be able to understand. And I may not be able to understand despite everything I went through in my entire life. But I don't need to understand. I don't need to feel the pain they're going through in order for me, in order for you to care, in order for you to actually take a step forward and do something. Anyone in this situation, now the ones who are under the rebels, they died. You can't save these people, you give up. I gave up on that. They died. They are dead. But there are so many thousands who survived. And survive doesn't mean you're going to make it for a long time if you don't get the support needed. You're injured. Many of these people have been injured by the war. Some of them lost, their legs or their arm and so on. And now they are injured again because of this earthquake. On top of that, there is a financial disaster. There's no job. All these people being squeezed. There's 4.5 million people squeezed in a place that used to have 500,000 people. So there's no job opportunities. There's no housing opportunities. The borders for you are closed. You can't cross other countries. There's not much for you to do. So I want you to try to be considerate. Put yourself in their shoes, not feel the pain, but feel the misery of this situation, and think of ways to help these people. And if you made it into Georgetown, that means you're smart. The application is very terrible and difficult to do. So if you made it, that means you're smart enough to find interesting ways and an innovative way to help people on the ground. But I know on this session, we have people from outside Georgetown. We have people from different countries joining us. And I'm not ignoring you, but also want to put focus on Georgetown. But regardless of who you are or where you are in the world, there are tools you can use, whether you are inside Syria or whether you are in Sweden or in Louisiana or in Georgetown. There are always resources that could be used to help people on the ground in Syria. So do not be useless. Do not be a useless human being sitting on a chair or sitting at home watching things and getting depressed about it. What's the benefit of you watching depressing news and not doing anything about it? You're going to be even feeling so bad. But if you watch something sad, annoying, and you don't do something about it, you're going to feel awesome, fantastic, fabulous. So watch this news because you need to be informed. Some of you may want to work with politics or so, and other businesses. Everything is related to humanity. So you have to stay informed And in order for you to not get depressed by the news that's happening, you're gonna always have traumatic news. You have war in Ukraine, you have disasters in Syria been going on for years, and you have an Afghanistan challenge. So there's depressing news. They are not depressing if you act upon them. So today we want you to act upon them. Go back to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Omar. Thank you, Omar and Muzna. I think what we hear now is, despite how devastating the news is, for me, it's very heartwarming to see the younger Syrian generations as yourselves being so involved, so determined, so dedicated to the Syrians who continue to be forgotten nationally, but also internationally and regionally. And I think the contextualization that you both provided, the weaponization of aid, which is adding a layer of tragedy to a population, civilian, and let's remind ourselves, these are civilian populations, men, women, and children, who already suffered from bombing, from chemical attacks, from being under the rubbles, and we have another layer of rubbles which have come with the earthquake. And we're telling them, well, you were forgotten before, you will still be forgotten now, despite the devastating impact of that earthquake, which is drawing international attention again. So I think it's very important that you draw this attention to this specific area in Syria. And I think there were doctors in Idlib who were also interviewed who said, when you're under the rubbles, if you wait too long, and that's also the urgency of that situation, you need to get amputated after a while because you lose your limbs. So we're talking about disabled future generations and children who are orphaned, families which have been completely wiped out. And we were talking with Muzna before the panel, family of 10, 13, completely wiped out from their community and from their relatives. So now I want to bring it back to the audience and see if there are any questions here from the students in the room. You were asked to act, right, and intervene. Thank you so much. If there are no questions for now, or is there? No, not for now. I'll move on to the online audience. Somebody saying, Isra saying, we can all contribute and make a difference. A Syrian student who started an initiative to collect donations, and now they reached $30,000 or $3,000 so far. I'm glancing through them. There's a report from the UNSR on the negative impact of the unilateral coercive measures on the enjoyment of human rights, claiming that there are unintended consequences of the sanctions on humanitarian aid and delivery. He's curious about, can you respond if you are seeing something else on the ground in Syria? Maybe this applies to areas under government control. And there's been research done saying sanctions they're not the source of the human insecurity, but they can exacerbate human insecurity. So is there a divide between government-held and non-government held areas in terms of the impact on the human security of the population?
Yeah, there is a difference for sure, but like the difference, it's like for Northwest Syria, that it's like the international community and Russia and the Syrian regime backed with Russia, who's like block the humanitarian aid and also put this area under siege, not the opposite way, because like the US lifted the sanctions for 6 months, so they did like a window of lifting the sanctions to facilitate and to ease like the transactions to Syria. But it just like before the lifting of sanctions, like temporary lifting of sanctions from the US aid, from the US, sorry, we had like around 72 airplanes landed in Damascus and full of humanitarian aid, and also delivered also to Al Amana, which is an organization led by Assad, and nothing applied on this aid. So sanctions, it's not regarding there's no impact for the sanctions on aid. But it just like, this is the argument of the regime to claim, because like also people in the regime held areas, they said like there is no civil defense teams came to support them and like to help them. And there is corruption in the government. So the Syrian regime blamed the international community and the sanctions on his corruption, and that's like why there is a lot of civilians have been rescued from the regime-held areas. So it's just like their narrative to blame others on but not themselves, and where is like the blocking and the sanctions, actually it's for Northwest Syria. It's not like the terms of sanctions as like the sanctions as led by the international community. I mean like the sanctions that applied by the Syrian regime and backed by Russia and China in the Security Council.
Okay, Muzna. Omar, would you like to answer?
I want to clarify something very important when it comes to the general license 123. That the narrative has been spread that it's lifting of sanctions, which is technically not correct. It's not lifting of the sanctions. It's more of a clarification that all organizations that trying to do any sort of humanitarian work, humanitarian relief to Syria, they can do it without sending to the Treasury Department or so on to be declared in a way. It's more of you have a smoother way of getting into Syria without the sanctions. There is no lifting of the sanctions. The sanctions on Maher al-Assad are not lifted, or Asma al-Assad are not lifted. They're not lifted for 6 months or not. They're not lifted at all. It's more of a clarification, encouraging all these organizations worldwide to provide aid to Syria. So the US put this general license there with a language that 99.9% of the world does not understand. I didn't understand anything about it, so I had to call the State Department and get a clarification. That helped the regime fed the same narrative that their sanctions are preventing the aid from coming to Syria. So the United States government has fed the same narrative the regime is feeding to its people. Again, big mistake, big problem. And that's a failure of the US government in presenting a general license. It's supposed to be to serve the Syrian people, not to be against them, which being translated even by the Senate. I was in a call with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and they also thought the sanctions were lifted, which made, of course, other countries also believe the sanctions were lifted. So other countries would be more courageous, I would say idiots, in other words, to try to normalize their relationships with the Assad regime. And that's a big problem, that when we don't tell the story in the right way, we get problems affiliated with that story. So again, one of the things I said when I started is the Syrian regime tried to take advantage of this crisis to wash away their crimes of 12 years. The Syrian regime took the World Health Organization delegation into areas of regime bombardment and showed these areas as earthquake impacted areas. And then the World Health Organization director came out on Twitter and said, I met with His Excellency Bashar al-Assad. And I don't know how to react to these people that are supposed to be intelligent, but they are the worst thing that you can see during this crisis. They have no understanding, they have no consideration, no respect to over 12 million refugees who have to flee their homes because of the Syrian regime. They have no respect for the over 1 million people who've been tortured by Assad, no respect for over 500,000 people killed by Assad, no respect at all. And they say, His Excellency. Of course, His Excellency, he's a war criminal, and and by the way, the Syrian dictator, he's a doctor. Can you believe it? That doctor, and he's an eye doctor. And by the way, coincidence, in Syrian prisons, they pull the eyes of so many prisoners, despite the fact that the president is an eye doctor. At least keep consideration to the eyes. He's an eye doctor. So let's not feed the wrong narrative. The sanctions are not lifted. The sanctions are necessary. The sanctions do not hurt the Syrian people. Does the Syrian regime try to go around the sanctions and pressure down the Syrian people? We'll always do that. The Syrian regime will do anything to hurt the Syrian people, to pressure them to go and speak out against the sanctions. But the main mission of the Syrian regime is to tell the international community sanctions are hurting the people. Remove them. Remove them so I can finance my killing machine, so I can go kill more people, so I can go detain more people, so I can go and steal more aid. We had people from the Red Crescent who were delivering aid through the regime-held area. They were prevented from going to the opposition area unless they give 80% of the aid they are holding with them. So the regime is actively stealing the aid. It's not new. The regime steals the aid as in the form of products. They tell you, like, give me the food, the food, the medicine you have, and the car, ambulance cars. But also, the regime steals the money that comes to Syria through the manipulation of the currency. So if 51% of, in most cases, of each dollar goes to the regime, does not go to aid. So that's the biggest problem. That's why we technically we want to advocate against sending any aid through the Syrian regime, because the regime is stealing it. At the same time, we care about the people who are living in the regime controlled areas, because not everybody under the control of the regime supports the regime. Those are innocent people who are forced. They cannot flee. They are under the siege of the Assad regime. So we want the aid to be delivered to these people. The White Helmets or Mulham team, they cannot cross and go to the regime-held area. The regime will bomb them, will kill them, torture them to death. So they can't do that. So we have this equation that's very difficult to address. So sending the aid through the regime is stealing it, controlling the Red Cross, not entirely controlling, but they take them where they want. Red Cross cannot go where they want in Syria. The regime control every single area they go to. This is against any law, should be against any law. The problem is, despite all the crimes of the Assad regime, there's so many years, the international community is still treating Assad like a regular president. They're treating the Syrian government like a real government, which is the biggest mistake we have. The biggest mistake committed by the international community, treating Assad like a regular president, treating the Syrian government like a valid government. They are not. And we have evidence. We have evidence of the Syrian regime bombing its own people with chemical weapons, evidence of torture, evidence of double tap attacks. Double tap attacks is when they attack an area and then they wait until the rescue team, like the White Helmets, come, and then they bomb the rescue teams. And that happened to the White Helmets. So there are so many war crimes and crimes against humanity that's been done by the Syrian regime, but still the international community treating this regime as a real authority. That's a problem that should be stopped.
I'll stay on that point, Omar, because we have, after Alexandra's previous question, a question raised by our own student, Jillian, who's asking, there's a move towards normalization, as you've hinted. Contrary to other countries, such as different developments on this front with Tunisia, Egypt, and Jordan, but Syria, there is a push towards normalization. She's asking, how are Syrian activists balancing the need to prioritize humanitarian efforts post-earthquake with the need to address normalization? How is this normalization push to be best addressed at this point to counter this trend? Yes.
At the first day of the earthquake, I don't want to go and advocate for keeping the sanctions. That's the worst thing that I feel to do, but I have to, because a lot of people trying to ask for aid, and somebody else have to focus on the fact that the Syrian regime is trying to take advantage of this crisis to normalize themselves, because they have strong allies like United Arab Emirates that has no respect for human rights in Syria at all. They've been supporting the Assad regime, and after my testimony at the UN Security Council, they tried to remove my testimony from the record of the UN Security Council because I spoke against their violations. So the regime is trying in any way to normalize their relationships, and somebody has to focus on that. And it's very difficult to balance that, because at the same time, I would love to go and try to convince every friend we have, every person I know, every organization, every country to actually donate to the White Helmets, to the Mulham team, to the Syrian Medical American Society in order to help. It's a challenge. You don't know where to focus on, and people on the ground because social media is a very, very powerful tool. That's how we gathering most aid and so on. When you go out, people on the ground can criticize you for focusing on aid, even though focusing on sanctions, even though they understand the importance of that, because their priority is not that right now. When you are, there's that, pyramid where if you starved, freedom does not matter. If you thirsty, food doesn't matter. So that happens in prison. I didn't think about freedom when I was starving. Never, because I was starved. Food is the first thing that I think about. Same thing for people in this extreme situations. They think about the tiniest possibility of life before they can think about something that's wider, that playing the whole game around them. So we have to make sure that everybody fill their own function. Rescue team, they do the rescuing, and people, whatever that's lobbying or advocacy or so, they do their work and so on. We should not lose our functions to fill other functions. However, we should contribute when we have the time and the opportunity. It's very important.
Yeah, it's like regarding the countries that is like already doing like a normalization with the regime, they are already like in a good relationship with the regime. So it's not a surprise for us. Like there are countries, or even like Italy in Europe, that is the first European country that sent like a airplane of humanitarian aid to the regime and so on. So it's not a surprise for us, because like they're already in a good position with them. But it's just like what's the most important, it's like the Western countries and also the international communities through the institutions in Human Rights Council and Security Council and so on. And I would say also he's trying also to give us like a trap to because like we have a lot of work to do on the ground. Like specifically, it's just like also the epicenter of the earthquakes, it's in the northwest, not in the Damascus. So this is also another argument to say, it's like if you want to support the Syrian people, go to the northwest, where there's like zero officials of the UN visited this area, while all of them just like went to Damascus and visited Damascus, and none of them visited Northwest, even though the White Helmets in last Wednesday, we had like our media conference to convey our messages for civilians, but as well also for the international community. That's like, none of you visited Syria, like Northwest Syria, and here you should go. You should visit Northwest Syria and deliver aid to Northwest Syria, because here's the epicenter, the closest area to the epicenter, not the south, not Damascus. But it's not surprise. It's for sure, it's not our priority to advocate for that, for the White Helmets I'm talking about. But for sure, it's like we blame the international community. We ask the UN to offer apologies for the Syrian people because of their failure in Syria, because they have let down the Syrian people in their response. But for sure, it's like we continue to balance also our work, and normalization. It's one of the one of the priority for us as well, because like as Omar said, it's like the Assad is like benefiting from the current situation and from the earthquake.
Thank you both for that. So I will link the following questions. They link to that discussions anyway. So Lara is asking, what are the most effective ways we can curb the Syrian regime's attempt to exploit this disaster to further assert its power and influence? And another question from Tima and Sewad is also linked. How can we abroad, people being based abroad, help directly the Syrian populations inside? And Siwad was wondering, the WHO said that they have been trying to send help to Northwest Syria. Is that true? And she has been in contact between the WHO and the White Helmets. Has there been any contacts between the WHO and the White Helmets or any other organization on the ground?
At the first week, we had no communication. No, we haven't received any support or also a request to receive like assistance from them. But after our media conference, like it's like the Martin Griffiths, like the responsible for humanitarian issues at the UN visited Sarmada inside Damascus, inside the northwest, sorry, and he visited Damascus before. So because we asked, it's like we're gonna not meet with the UN officials outside of Syria, we're gonna only meet them inside Syria and northwest Syria. So this is why we put the pressure on them, and they visited the northwest. But in the first week, we had nothing. And as I said, it's just like the first 6 trucks that entered northwest Syria. They were scheduled before the earthquake, so it's not related to the aid for the earthquake. And there's still like if you compare between the capacity of the Syrian people, specifically in the north, and also the Syrian civil society, and what the UN is receiving regarding the donation and also the support from the member states, you can find like the support we got it from the Syrian people. It's more than what we got it from the UN, which is shame on this like system. It's really broken. It's been like established under the Second World War, and to support the global north, not to support the people of the global south. And it's really broken system, and it's been not useful for us at all. They failed us, and they continue to fail us actually. And a lot of the campaigns actually in northwest Syria by the civilians against the UN. They said it's like the people of Deir Zor, they send like more trucks than the UN, which is true. It's like all over almost like 82 trucks delivered from Deir Zor from eastern Syria to the northwest, while the UN sent only around like 25 trucks. So it's really by numbers also, not only by feelings. It's like the northwest is supported by the Syrian people more than the international community itself.
Omar, I'll come to you in a second. I just want to ask about the white helmets. So there are comments in the chat about Isra and others who say they collected money and they're unable to send because, you know, this whole campaign. How can they, and Bayan, I think also at the end, is there a foolproof way of sending, being able to collect, and Tima also wanting to help the people directly? You have a funding campaign.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, there's 2 links. The first link, which is our website, where you can, when you wanted to donate, to select which like part of donation you wanted to give for, like helmets, like uniform, or like the whole of our equipment for search and rescue. Or there is also GoFundMe. You can find also on the website of the Syria campaign, where you can also send like donation directly, and otherwise, like for like donations from institutions or from organizations, so you can reach out to us. We can set like a agreement between us, and also to provide our bank accounts in Turkey and also in Europe to receive the donation. Thank you.
Omar.
Well, this current question: how can we limit the Syrian regime from taking advantage of this earthquake? Let's start with the Americans. Being an American citizen has a lot of power because you actually can Google the number of your representative and the Congress and actually reach out to them, email them, bother them, and tell them, hey, I want you to release this statement about the normalization of the Assad regime. And if 10, 20, 30, 40 people do it, from my experience, the congressman, the senator, they care enough. It's their chief of staff and their staff. They are the ones who feed them with all the information. So if you send the emails, you can reach them. You can make them come out with statements. These statements on Twitter and these meetings they have with members of different countries, like in the Arab Emirates or Jordan or other countries that have the potential of stopping this so much support of the Syrian regime. This is very impactful. For you as an American, but also the donations are very significant. They're very little money. That's a lot, because an organization like the White Helmets that's been serving in Syria for so long time with very little budget compared to the disaster that exists on the ground, they have learned to be very cost efficient. So every dollar you send is very, very useful, because this money are not spent on administrative costs. This money is going directly to the people that needs it on the ground. And that's the most important part, because if you send money for Red Cross, it's a great organization. A lot of money goes in administrative cost. But smaller organizations, local organizations on the ground, when you send them donation, it has more significance, and it goes straight to them. It goes to the problem, to addressing the problem. It does not go to a huge organization with a huge umbrella with different parties in it, and then the process, so much money goes away and so on, in addition to the corruption that existed because of the regime is in control of these of the regions where these organizations are serving. So one very simple thing you can do is, in your surrounding, there's always people who want to help, but helping for them may be like 10 steps. You can make it one step. Just write a message that you copy paste all the time. That's what I do. It's very smooth. Everybody uses it and it goes very well. I just write, if anybody is mentioning Syria, want to help Syria, send him one of these 3 links, and I send a link. That's the White Helmets, Mulham Team, Syrian Emergency Task Force. And I send them with links. They click on the link, and then is the donation. Put your card. So it's very smooth. At this time, we are very lazy human beings. We don't want to do a lot of stuff. We don't want to have a website where we're going to donate. They're going to take us through. Click here, then do this. Then no. You want one click, fill, donate. It's easy. We want easy stuff. Amazon Prime. Things should come before you order them. Same thing, you need to smooth the whole process. So that's one of the things you can contribute with if you don't have the money. Actually, write this message, send it to different people, but also use your presence on social media. Most of us have social media. Use your presence to actually share certain content that are far from propaganda and misinformation, that are clear information, simple, that you actually can distinguish that on your own and share it with people. Don't underestimate if you have 100 followers. Those 100 people, technically 100 people may care more because they know you personally. When you post something, they see it. If I have 1 million followers, for example, not everybody is going to see everything. They see quickly, they click very quickly, but you have 100 people who know you. So reach out to these people, guide them, tell them, show them what's going on, give them a page of someone you trust, tell them about the White Helmets. The story of the White Helmets is fabulous. It's very beautiful. It's a hero journey, which is that's the model of our Hollywood movies. It's like going very bad, that they do it better, then go so bad, then better again, and so on. It's a very inspiring story. Share that story. Stories are very significant. They have so much power. If you share a very beautiful story, very courageous story from the White Helmets, everybody want to help. It's all about telling a simple story that make people inspired to help. Because if you tell them 10,000 people died, they're gonna say, it's so huge crisis, I can't do nothing. But if you tell them, look, there's a team, they inspire me every time I see them. I feel fantastic when they are saving a life, and by sending whatever I can send, they will do their work better. Because every one of us want to see good results of their contribution. So I would encourage you to share the story of the White Helmets. It would help a lot, I promise.
Yeah, I want to just also to add one point regarding the Syrian refugee situation in Turkey. Gaziantep, it's the hub of the Syrian civil society. So now all of Syrian organizations are also in a urgent situation. So we lost also team members, our offices, and same applies for other organizations. And also, Turkey is the largest country in the world hosting refugees in the world. So and in the United States of America, like 2 months ago, the Biden administration announced the new program, which is like a private sponsorship to sponsor refugees. So please, it's like a sponsor, refugees to come here to the US, because already the numbers in Turkey is very high, and already there is no permanent solution rather than having resettlement in northern countries. So please put also pressure on that, because after the the innovation, after the war in Ukraine led by Russia. So we saw what was like impossible turned possible because like there is like political will. So everything you may see it's like impossible. It could be possible, but it's just like we need to mobilize our resources and to put more political pressure on governments to achieve what we want to do.
And you gave us very specific leads today that we
Yeah.
can all follow within our own capacity. Thank you for that. Is there a question in the audience? If there's no question, the last question by Munir, could you please comment on the thread the director of the White Helmets, Raiz Saleh, whom you work closely with, actually, Muzna, during his meeting with the United Nations delegation 2 days ago, the threats that he announced today on Al Jazeera channel. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's not like a personal threat. It's just like it's kind of like to silence the international, the Syrian organizations and also Syrian actors, because like we are speaking out and about like what's happened in Syria, and for us what happened is a scandal, and it should be accountability for those who have been responsible in the UN to deliver aid and to open the borders, but they didn't. So this is what we are trying now. It's not enough to say sorry. We want to see like accountability and also actions. So this is why we are facing also another like struggles and isolation, because we are speaking out and speaking about the truth of what's happened in Syria. So yeah, and this is why we need always the support, because the White Helmets, it's a local organization. We are providing all the services for civilians, but also we protect their rights, because there is no others. Like the international community doesn't care about the rights of people. Unfortunately, they turned like people into numbers. So this is why it's very important to support the White Helmets with your own capacity.
Thank you very much, Muzna. Do you want to end with this is your last statement, because we're going to have to close do you have other recommendations?
I can share like some of the recommendations we shared with the Canadian government for Canadian society as well, regarding to host like more refugees, to facilitate and expedite also the applications of Syrians all over the world, because like it's very urgent right now, and also to tap on all of the possible resources, because every single action matters, and please like support us.
Thank you. Omar, your last words, please, for this session.
The people survived 12 years. They will survive the earthquake. They will get stronger again, and they will hopefully recover. And at some point, they will achieve freedom and democracy that we always dreamed of. At some point, Muzna and I would be able to return to Damascus without the fear of being executed at the airport. That won't happen easily. That will take some time. And the more you contribute, as a Syrian or non-Syrian, the faster we achieve this goal. A safe Syria, a better Syria it's better for the entire world. You know, I would rather be at Georgetown engaged in parties than in all debates about war and crimes, you know. So I would rather do that. And I believe that everyone who is living in a democracy has an incredible power to take advantage of that opportunity. The fact that you're living in democracy, do not take that for granted. And you are taking it for granted if you're not doing anything about the world problems, considering the fact that you can do something by actually talk to the politicians or use your voice and your vote in a proper way. And the ones who are not living in democracy, who are living under authoritarian regimes, they're very resilient people. The fact that you live under authoritarian regime means you become resilient automatically, because you have to go through the suffering, the pain, the corruption, and everything, and survive. You have at some point to be tortured and to be, you know, to die and then make it out after death. You need to be sometimes under rubbles and make it out. We both are strong if we live under democracies or authoritarian regimes. And we both can do something. Me as a Syrian, I can do something, and a Syrian on the ground can do something, and you regardless what country you're from. The world needs you. Syria needs you. Ukraine needs you. The Iranian people, the Iranian women on the street, they need you. Same thing in Afghanistan. Same thing in so many places in the world. Syria is not the only problem, but Syria, unfortunately, is today the most urgent problem because of the earthquake. So do not hesitate to reach out if you have any question, a question that keeping you away from contributing and helping other people. I am available. My team at the Syrian Emergency Task Force is available. My team at Atrocities Tracker is available. And I'm sure the White Helmets and Mulham team and the Syria campaign, all these organizations are here for you if you want to know something. If you want to contribute and if you want to contribute better, we're here for you.
Thank you so much, Muzna Duried and Omar Alshogre. What you told us today is that Syrian lives do matter, they should matter, and we can work on it to make them matter as well. Thank you very much both, and thank you to the audience.